What if the fear that's been stopping you isn't actually about the thing that you're afraid of? What if it's protecting you from something completely different? Something older, something deeper, something you didn't even know was still there? Because I can guarantee 9 times out of 10, it has nothing to do with what you're actually afraid of. So let's talk about what fear really is protecting you from, why it shows up the way it does, and what changes when you stop letting it make all your decisions. Welcome back to These Boots Are Made for Healing with me, Leanne Harris, an inner freedom coach. And today we're talking about fear. Not how to get rid of it, not how to push through it, but what it's actually responding to. Last week, I spoke about the freeze, the gap between knowing what to do and actually being able to do it. And how, for me, that showed up as months of planned content I just couldn't post. This week, I want to go deeper because fear isn't random. It's not irrational, and it's definitely not a sign that something is wrong with you. Fear is information. And when you start understanding what it's actually responding to, everything changes. Here's something I've noticed both in my own life and in the work I do with clients. Fear doesn't show up everywhere. It's actually weirdly specific. You might be totally fine doing one thing, completely confident in one area of your life. And then when it comes to this one particular thing, you freeze. For me, that was visibility, being seen and putting myself out there. Throughout my employed years, I put on my work uniform or my work hat, and I became that character, and I somehow seemed to manage. I could do all sorts of things. I could talk to and support other people. I could plan, strategize, and create. But the moment it came to actually showing up for myself, for my own business, sharing my face, my voice, my opinions, I'd shut down. And for years, I thought that meant I wasn't ready, that I needed more training, more confidence, more proof that I was good enough. But that wasn't it. The fear wasn't about the content, it wasn't about the platform, it wasn't even really about me being judged. It was about what my subconscious had learnt visibility meant. And that's the thing about fear. It's not just I'm scared, it's I'm scared because my brain has linked this thing to something unsafe. Maybe your brain has learned that being visible means being criticized. Maybe it's learned that wanting more leads to disappointment. Maybe it's learned that speaking up gets you shut down, ignored, or ridiculed. So now, years later, when you go to post on social media, pitch to a client, raise your prices, share your work, that old belief fires up and fear shows up to protect you. Not because you're in actual danger, but because some part of you still thinks you are. Let me share this with you. I've got a method called the Freedom Framework, where we dive deep into goals, find out what the blockages are that could be preventing you from achieving them. Because often it's something totally unrelated to what your conscious mind thinks it is. So for me, my goal is to have a successful business. But it turns out that for me to be able to achieve that, I need to overcome subconscious blockages around, bear with me here, travel. So for me to have a successful business, that will enable me to travel more. And somewhere deep in my subconscious mind, there's a fear of getting lost or stranded in another country. Totally irrational, most likely will never happen, but somewhere in my subconscious brain, that belief has formed. And so for me to move forward, I need to release that trapped emotion, that belief that it's not safe for me to travel because my subconscious mind links success to travel to danger, and that's the block. Now, I'm not saying I suddenly have no fear anymore. I'm just not paralyzed by fear anymore. I still don't have all the answers. I'm still not the expert on everything, And I still feel nervous sometimes before I do something outside my comfort zone or publish something new. But here's the difference: fear doesn't run the show anymore. It's there, I notice it, I acknowledge it, but I don't let it make my decisions. And that changes everything. Last week, I published my first ever podcast episode. And honestly, I was terrified. My heart was racing. My brain was doing its usual thing, throwing out all the negative self talk. But I took a deep breath in and I did it anyway. Not because I suddenly became brave, not because I conquered the fear or I pushed through it with sheer determination or willpower, but because I've done the work. I've identified the beliefs that were driving the fear. I've released the trapped emotions that were keeping those beliefs locked in place. And now, even when fear shows up, I'm learning to just go with it and to just try and have fun with it in the process. I don't need to be perfect. I don't need to have it all figured out. I just need to take that next step. And you know what? I'm actually excited to see where it goes and I'm enjoying the ride. And that's something I could never, ever have said a few years ago, even a few months ago, even up until a few weeks ago. I did stop in fear. I had so many ideas, I had things I wanted to do, but I just couldn't do any of them because the fear was louder than my desire to move forward. Now, the fear is still there, it's just quieter, and I'm louder. And this isn't just about visibility or business. Fear can show up in ways that completely limit your life. I want to share a story now about one of my clients. She came to me absolutely terrified of travel, like properly terrified. She got extremely anxious at the thought of being in a car, getting on a bus. It had gotten to the point where she couldn't do the school run on her own. She hadn't seen family members who lived just a few hours away in years, and her kids had never been on holiday. Not because she didn't want to, but because the fear had taken over. Her subconscious had learned to associate travel with danger, old beliefs, old patterns, old protection mechanisms that were still running in the background. So we did one session, just one 2 hour session. We identified the negative belief, we released it, we recoded it with something much more empowering. And since then, well, she's visited family members she hasn't seen in years. She's been in the car on the school run. She's even booked a flight to take her family on their first vacation in 9 years. 9 years. Let that sink in. That's not willpower. That's what happens when fear stops being in charge. When you clear that belief that's been driving the fear doesn't need to show up in the same way anymore. It's not about being fearless, it's about being free to move, even when that fear is present. So if you're listening along thinking, yeah, but I am stuck, I do freeze, I just can't seem to move forward, I want you to hear this. It's not because you're not ready, and it's not because you don't have what it takes. It's because fear is doing exactly what it's designed to do. It's protecting you. Your subconscious is protecting you based on old information. Now, I'm not going to give you a magic fix here because honestly, deep subconscious work is what creates lasting change. And that's what I do in my sessions. But there is something you can start doing at home that might help you understand your fear a little bit better. And that is simply to notice it, not to fix it, not to push through it, not to force yourself to feel differently. Just notice. Now, I want to be really clear here. I'm not talking about fear that's keeping you physically safe. If your gut is telling you something that is genuinely dangerous, please listen to that. I'm talking about the fear that shows up when you're about to post, say, on social media, have a difficult conversation, raise your prices, or just put yourself out there in some way. The fear that's not about actual danger, but about old beliefs around safety, worthiness, or being seen. The next time you feel that freeze, that hesitation, that voice in your head saying, don't do it, in those kind of situations, just pause for a second. Put your hand on your heart or on your belly, take a slow breath in and ask, what does this fear feel like in my body? Is it a tightness in your chest, a knot in your stomach, tension in your shoulders? And then just ask, what is this fear protecting me from? You don't need to have an answer. You're just opening up a conversation with that part of you that's scared, because when you stop fighting fear and start listening to it, something shifts. You start to see it as information, not as the enemy, and that is the first step. So that's what I want to leave you with today. Fear is specific. It's learned over time and it's protecting you from something, but it doesn't have to stay in charge. I'd love to know where this lands for you. Where does fear show up in your life? What's one thing you've been putting off recently because you've been waiting to feel ready? Come find me on Instagram or Facebook, send me a message, let me know what comes up for you. And once again, thank you so much for listening. I'm so glad you're here, and I'll see you next week.